The Radio Misfits Podcast Network.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Planted with Sara Payan podcast. I'm Sara Payan, your host, and today I have an old friend, Luna Stower, head of impact at Ispire, on the show. Welcome, Luna. It's so good to have you here.
It's my pleasure.
We're both so busy. It's hard to get time to sit down and chat, so I'm looking forward to this.
Yes, the movement never sleeps.
No, it doesn't.
Neither do we.
No, we don't. We keep rushing from moment to moment, especially in, being that this is such a nascent industry and there's just all hands on deck all the time. But before we get into all of that, and we've got a lot to talk about, what was your first cannabis experience?
Oh man, behind Golden Skate in San Ramon, California. I was 11 years old, sixth grade. And I hit my first blunt. Of course, it's a very Bay Area story. And yeah, I remember going inside to the skating rink and just seeing all the colors and feeling my body as I was, rollerblading, because I was a rollerblader back then. That was big in the 90s, 1996. And I just remember being like, wow, this feels really good. And I continued using it until, kind of unconsciously, just for fun, until college, when I went to my first 420 at Porter Meadow at UC Santa Cruz in California and realized, oh, this is like an oppressed plant. This is medicine. I'm using this to medicate. And I actually had some language around it. But in the beginning, it was just something that made me feel good. And I never thought, something that was kind of naughty, but not too naughty, because in the Bay Area, it was still pretty legal. But it was something that, your parents didn't want you doing, but we weren't worried about, going to jail for it. It wasn't something that we thought was going to be super addictive. Like, it wasn't a fear-based thing. But I definitely shifted my understanding of like, wow, I was actually treating low level anxiety and, the stresses of being an adolescent, all those things. Later on, I was like, oh, I was actually using it to medicate and didn't know.
Yeah. I'm mentioning how more chill it was in California. Like growing up in Michigan, it wasn't chill. Like it was, you could go to jail for resin in your bowl, which is why I find fascinating, like the booming industry in Michigan now. I mean, you're talking about the rollerblading. I only did it a couple times. I ended up I was headed down a hill that was going to be the end of me, and I didn't know how to use the brakes. And I ended up doing, because I'm a skier, so you know what you do when you fall when you ski. Oh no, you fall on your butt.
But
And I was in shorts. And good thing I have a mom who's a nurse who knows how to pick gravel out of someone's backside.
oh, sister.
Well,
Hey, I know something that works for that too, cannabis.
Right? Absolutely. But it's probably good that I wasn't smoking at that moment, because that would have just been, I would have heading towards the lake.
You did the right thing.
I tried. It was right before I came out here. And then I was living in the Haight, and I remember walking down the street and just smelling it in the air and being like, this is a whole different thing. So chill, so nice. But it's
And it really just speaks to the co-creation of what's okay in society, right? It's like the drug war was passed down, and they took so much energy with propaganda and fear mongering with reefer madness, that it really just goes to show that we kind of co-create our understanding of what's okay.
Yeah.
And so your example in the Haight, it was just once things become ubiquitous and things just aren't a big deal, it's only a problem if it's a problem, right? We create the narratives around these things. So that's what showed me too when I went to college. I was just like, oh, this is a conspiracy. It's so obvious that it's a conspiracy, because there's nothing wrong with this plant. It doesn't kill anyone, and yet there's so much energy around it. And that's what piqued my interest. I'm like, something's up with this. Everyone's focusing on, civil rights issues and human rights issues and sovereignty issues. And I'm like, this kind of falls into all of that.
Oh, yeah.
This is a bodily autonomy sovereignty issue. And we don't really name it as a human rights issue, this prohibition. We think that it's a drug war, that it's keeping people safe, that there's addiction relations to it. But it really started out with such racist roots that, it's time to readdress why are we in some places it's totally fine. In some places it's not. There's a reason for that.
Yeah, I mean it's a call to critical thought. It's that whole thing of not everything legal is right and not everything illegal is wrong. Like I just had Rick Steves on the show and he was talking about the first time he came on, he talked about this too. He was like, I'm not I'm not supporting this because I'm like all like pro cannabis, though I do like it. It's about a personal freedoms issue. It is
Yep.
my personal right to smoke a joint and stare at my fireplace for 3 hours. And the
Right. Just
fact,
like it's my choice to terminate a pregnancy if I so choose not to. That's all these things are really aligned. It's like,
yeah,
what does the government have a say over?
right. Right. And the impact that it has on people's lives. Like I have a friend who just recently got her record expunged for, a choice she made when she was younger and she can finally after years of struggling to find work where they were okay with her having a record, she can finally get work. And it's like these rules that are made by people who do not get affected by them. It's just kind of like that whole thing of that song, where the Creedence Clearwater Revival song where they're like, I ain't no senator's son. We look at these like
No, we're
these
the ones getting drafted. We're not the ones sitting on couches watching the war from our televisions.
exactly. Exactly. And so that's one thing that I've always enjoyed talking to you about because I think we're very much aligned on like the the political side of it, the personal freedom side of it. And is what got you into you were part of the movement, but what got you into the industry? And I always like when we talk about industry, people are always like, "Ooh, industry." I'm like, I always like to say industry slash movement. But as we evolve, there are some people who can say that, and other people who are like purely industry, and that's kind of where we're seeing kind of the gap and the issues.
Yeah. So before I answer that, I just want to go back to what we were just saying for a second. Also, it's
Yeah.
not, something I heard recently that was really interesting is beyond what we just named around bodily autonomy and civil rights is also national security. If you think about it, hackers and developers and programmers typically skew towards cannabis. And so when our government is not allowing folks that consume cannabis to enter into the military or enter into these roles in national security, I read an article recently that is actually becoming a national security threat because we're not actually hiring the most qualified people to be doing all of the things we need to be doing at the highest level of our military and border security and all these things. Imagine, cutting out half or more of a population of qualified applicants simply because of their use of cannabis. So I think that that's something else we need to start talking about too. That was one thing I never really made a connection on, but I think it's wow, it's like to actually name that it's a threat to our national security to have people, to be able to ban the box that you have to check, do you use cannabis or have you been convicted of a cannabis crime? Also, they do, spinal taps and stuff like that for high security clearance. I think that's also something we need to be thinking about at a time when global politics tensions are at an all-time high, that we need to make sure that we're not banning really smart people from keeping our democracy afloat. So, but what got me into the industry, it's hard to say. So the movement really started when I was a kid. I've been smoking, selling, and growing this plant since middle school and high school. It's always been ubiquitous in my life. And really, when I was teaching, I was selling some vape pens and some vegan granola for Pura Vida, and Guy Rocourt, who's one of the founders of Pop and Barkley. He had a company called Neos back in the day from Colorado. And I was still teaching and I was just running around all the dispensaries and realized, you know what, I think I found my new passion. Even though I have a master's in teaching, I had 10 years in public schools, helped unionize public schools and charter schools, very, very high level. I'm credentialed to teach everything from kindergarten to college. So education was always my passion, but then seeing how much work still needed to be done in the legalization space. This was in 2014-15 when I formally entered into the space and went, you know what, I'm gonna really give my shot at this. So I left the classroom and started with Jetty Extracts. I was their first W-2 employee. Same at Ispire. I was their first full-time hire, and both have gone public. So that's been kind of crazy to see the movement go into the industry and become, mainstream and traded on the Canadian Stock Exchange, the NASDAQ, the US Stock Exchange. But really it was, as a brand ambassador, as a marketing person and as a sales rep. really sitting in those retailers and understanding what regulation looked like, how labeling had to be, what supply chain looked like, what buyers were requiring, and be able to help build brands from scratch, things like Click Spray, and worked with the folks who from Cards Against Humanity who were before the pandemic creating a comedy focused cannabis brand and things like that, that really allowed me to bring my educational element from my background. And also both my parents were in marketing. My dad was in market research and my mom was in branding. She was the VP of marketing for Safeway. She launched their Safeway Select line. She did the whole CVS restructuring. My dad worked at Apple and IBM during their big launches, and worked on a ton of really important campaigns. And so growing up, I was always like, anti-capitalist and like, oh, my parents are such, business people, and I'm going to be this hippie educator that's going to save the world. And then really, I'm an embodiment of all of those things, because in order to mainstream something and make as accessible as Tylenol, cannabis in every person's household, we're going to have mainstream marketing chops. We're going to have narratives that appeal to the mainstream and to help normalize and destigmatize this plant. And so I'm really grateful. Shout out to my parents for being those, capitalistic marketers that really showed me that, maybe I'm not selling Safeway Select cookies or something like that. That doesn't seem as important in the long run. That I'm able to bring those those psychology of buying and buyer types and the market research and the focus groups that my dad was so deeply seated into. We're doing a lot of that now. We need to make sure that these products are ready for market, that they're going to fit into the legal frameworks. We need to make sure that they're speaking to the women that are the number one buyers of this plant. And I think that it's been a really fun journey to see how people are like, oh, you went from classroom teaching into cannabis, that's a huge jump. And it's like, actually not really. You're repeating really simple ideas over and over with patience and compassion. You are, trying to apply to your knowledge base to a broad amount of knowledge bases, right? Because all kids come to the classroom with different understandings. All patients come and recreational users come with a different level of understanding. So it's actually been a really fun transition.
Yeah, well, you're mentioning Tylenol, and one of the conversations I've had with people is like having that balanced, educated conversation about cannabis so that we avoid having the Tylenol moment. Because as you know, we have colleagues that are like, cannabis can do everything. It's not addictive. It won't hurt anybody. Da 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 da. And it's like, okay, yes, and. Yes, and let's have better testing. Yes, and let's talk about dosage. Yes, and let's
Supply chain.
yeah, supply chain. It's such a huge thing. The plant itself isn't harmful, but how you're handling it is a whole different thing altogether. And education and marketing go hand in hand. It's kind of like I let when I went back to school, we were talking about Bernays. It's like, and he was, I mean, he was kind of evil, but he did bring forward tools that we could use for good. And when we're looking at marketing and branding and what's in a brand, I mean, because as we see this advent of adult use or recreational cannabis, people are like, oh, medicinal's out the way. Wait a minute, why aren't we selling as much? Cannabis sells itself. And it's like, well, this huge swath of the market, you just totally neglected, because wellness should be more of a conversation. And formula retail does not work in cannabis because of the nuances of what we're working with.
Yeah, and it already it not only were they forgotten about, but we were super rich and sophisticated and well experienced. They already had 20 years of BOGO deals at their local dispensary. They were patient appreciation days. We weren't, when 64 passed, we weren't allowed to use the word patient anymore. And it's like, if you really think about it, all use, in my opinion, is medical use. Whether even when you're just like, oh, you're just trying to relax with friends. Well, why are you trying to relax? It's because there's a low level of anxiety, or, oh, you just, it helps you wind down at the end of the day. Yeah, that's called sleep aid. Like everything relates back to solving an issue or creating equilibrium and balance within. I mean, that's what dis-ease is. There's not an ease, and cannabis does bring ease. And I think that that's such a brilliant framing of it, is when we wonder why there's been so many things dropping off, we blame it on the underground market or the traditional market, or obviously it should be blamed a lot on overtaxed, overcontrolled, and overregulation by the DCC and by the bodies that are regulating it. But really, it also is, we're not being spoken to as medical patients. I have fibromyalgia. fibromyalgia, I have degenerative joint disease, I have generalized pain disorders. I have a bunch of, cannabis is the master regulatory system. The endocannabinoid system is the master regulatory system for all of our systems, immune, nervous, endocrine, everything. So to say that it's something that we do for fun is such a belittling and an oversimplification of the plant. And it's super alienating and isolating for folks who have a lot of experience engaging with this plant as medicine, having our caregivers and our cooperatives and our collectives before they were considered, medical or recreational dispensaries. They were where we got our medicine from. And to have that shift and to have us be forgotten, if we had just, if it had been, two roads that started from the same starting line, maybe it would have made sense. But we had so much background in this narrative, in this dialogue, in this terminology. We're ADA protected. There was a lot of, protections for us that, us having our medicine, thanks to Pebbles Trippet, we can travel with our medicine. These were things that were because of medical rights. Brownie Mary, this was Prop 215 came about because of the AIDS epidemic and because of the criminalization of an elderly woman who was bringing in brownies to AIDS patients that were dying, not of AIDS, they were dying of wasting syndrome, which was being cured almost instantaneously by edibles. Obviously, they had other complications. There were other reasons why 30 to 40,000 of our gay population died in San Francisco during those few years of the epidemic. But really, people, if we didn't have that narrative around medicine, we wouldn't have the California, which Colorado copied, which everyone copied. Everyone is copied and pasted, whether it's our equity program, everything stems from California. As goes California, so goes the country and the world. And so I think we need to be really honoring of that. And yeah, we passed SB 34 to try to bring back compassion, but it's not enough.
We not need to enough. Yeah, it can't be enough because, I mean, in other areas, when you're working with a program like that, if it wasn't cannabis, companies would be able to get tax breaks for their generosity. We were, dispensaries were community centers. Like I remember talking to the Aldriches after 9/11. They opened early because people were freaked out and they wanted to go to their space of support, their safe space. And so there was already a line waiting for people to get in. So they were like, let's order some pizzas. Let's get everybody together. Let's comfort our community. And now, like, I just went up to Alaska this summer because Jeff was playing some shows. They aren't allowed to talk about medicinal use at all, and they've got cigarettes in their dispensaries.
Wow. Horrifying.
Yeah. And literally that's horrifying. I mean, and that's and I sometimes think, and I'm going to preface this with all you lovely men out there who are listening, who are allies and wonderful people, this is not about you. But that feminine energy, that nurturing energy, when we're getting into capitalism, is very quickly being killed.
Yes, that is part of the patriarchy, is control of the narrative, control of bodies, and control of economies. Yeah. And this is something that's been traditionally stewarded by women and Indigenous people and folks of color for a really long time. And the system is threatened by that. That's something that's out of their purview. It's not in the pharma model. It's not in the traditional model of economics. And so they are not happy with it. So they're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. And some things are just magical. Some things just aren't quantifiable. Some things have an ethereal nature to them, like opening up early on the day after. It's like, yeah, your office hours say one thing, but you're a human being and there's a human touch to this. That's the beauty of it. We're not a bank that can just open up a couple hours early because people are upset about something. We have that beautiful ability to work in the ether and the in-between and the imperceptible. And that is why people are so drawn to this industry. Even though they don't make good money, we could all be making better money doing the same roles that we're doing here outside. We'd have a lot less stress. We'd be able to take out loans. We'd be able to write off 280E and bank and advertise. Like, there's a reason why we're giving up so much to be in this space. It's because of that ethereal nature. It's because of that hard to quantify thing that is community that we're all desperately seeking and needing, that cannabis brings us.
Yeah. Yeah. I just remember a couple years ago, you and I were in New York and we were walking down the street. We were having a conversation about how we get people who have come in looking at it as a commodity, the commoditization and the coldness of it, and how we get them to understand why we're all really here. And I gave you a flip answer. I was like,
good luck.
Oh no, I was like, how do you negotiate with a coked up day trader? You know, and we're still seeing that. We're still seeing that, and it's I just don't know if it's like the collapse of an industry that gets people to like see the light or just leave so that we can look at this. Because I'll tell you, like in 2017, I had people coming up to me going, where should I invest? What should I do? Da 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 da. And the writing was on the wall for those of us who've been here for a while. I was like, listen, unless you really care about what we're doing, don't. Because it's a
No.
long game and you are not going to see your money for a very long time. And you need to be really careful who you get in bed with.
Excellent advice. And I always wonder that too. Looking back, I'm like, God, we were rosy. We were assuming it's like, imagine you have, you have to be somewhere at noon and you look at the GPS and it says like, there's like the green version, the yellow version, and the red version. You just take the green version. You're just assuming that every light's going to be green all the way there. It's like, no, if you're trying to be somewhere on time and not, is an important thing, you assume that they're all going to be red. You would vet for risk, right? You would hedge against potential loss. And we didn't do that. We all got so excited. And I think to your point, the drugged up day traders, I think because there were enough of them in the space that were, and it was funny, Steve D'Angelo just said this in Chile. I just got back from THC Expo Chile in Santiago last week. And he was telling his horror stories of what his experiences have been like. And, because I don't know if you saw State House just announced bankruptcy and stuff like that, which was what pulled in Harborside and Urban Leaf. And he's like, my biggest regret was getting excited when people were like, go bigger, scale, do this and that. And he was like, we should have just done what we were good at, dude, and left it. And I think that, there's a fine line because obviously, I'm with Ispire and we were able to scale, but that's because we're also in nicotine and hemp as well. So we have other streams of income that, we can bring in institutional investment. We can pull from, shareholders and the stocks from the NASDAQ. Like there's other institutional monies that are coming in, but truly cannabis companies, we did not think about the worst case scenario. And the worst case scenario is what happened. It was red lights every single way. And in fact, there was road closures, there was accidents, there was detours that brought you to a cliff that you would either go over or have to drive backwards, and traffic. You're not the only one on this road, right? You're watching everyone else go over the cliff and get stuck at the red lights, and you're seeing everyone else in traffic. So there was a collective trauma that occurred when we legalized. And I think that that's why a lot of folks now who are in new markets are really looking at the West Coast and seeing what we did wrong, seeing how our equity programs were inefficient and ineffective, seeing how overtaxing, over controlling, and over regulating will actually stifle the golden goose. We're supposed to be, the golden goose is going to continue laying eggs, but not if we are expecting everything to come from her. We need to pull it from other things. And this is why we need to deschedule completely, because until we are not on Schedule 1, people can't invest in us. Right. People can't get tax write-offs for working with us. They can't, accept monies if a cannabis company wants to donate to their local school or library. Even though it's technically legal, the school and libraries are nervous about accepting monies that are attached to something like that. And so we really need to get to a place where we can fully spread our wings and bring the joy and the healing that this plant has to offer.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, when we look at, the entrepreneurial opportunities for small business and that money staying in communities, it's a beautiful dream, and that's what we were really looking at. But when you look at like the technical support and the things that are available, there are some great nonprofits that support, entrepreneurs, but they also accept federal grants. And so their ability to help is extraordinarily limited.
It's a
So
gag rule.
Yeah, it really is. And you're saying going off the cliff, I was like, oh, there are mudslides too, like there's all sorts of things.
Boulders, wild animals crossing, roadkill,
all of the above.
Weather, acts of God. And you're like, dude, this was supposed to be a 12 and a half minute, like 10-mile ride. Like, come on.
Yeah. Yeah. And we
just had to pass a voter initiative, right? Like it was, do you want weed? Yes or no? And everyone went, yes. But really, they didn't realize I don't even use the word legalization anymore because it's a misnomer. It's either decriminalization or commercialization, which is tax control and regulate. People, when they were voting yes, they thought they were voting to decriminalize, but really they were voting to commercialize, which created more criminal elements to using, possessing, and growing the plant. I used to grow 6 plants per person per household. Now it's 6 per household. open container laws. You used to be able to have a joint in your ashtray, and it was kind of up to the discretion of the officer what to call that. Now it's considered an open container. There's a lot of new criminalizations that have come up from this. And thankfully, we just passed the law in January where it's illegal to use the smell of cannabis as a cause for search and seizure of your person, your property, or your home, which is really good for folks of color and people in marginalized communities, where that was really kind of like the ticket in, the Trojan horse to find other things that they could get caught for. But so that, and obviously, now they're banning the box. So if you have cannabis on your record, you're a cannabis user, you're not banned from employment. So we're doing small progressive policies in California, which are really exciting to see, but we need an overhaul. We need to deschedule immediately.
Yeah. It's super slow going. I mean, I have every bit of faith that we'll make it through this, but how long it takes and how many people are left standing once it's done is a whole other thing. I mean,
That's the hell of bureaucracy. It's like
Yeah.
they act like this is a job that they get to clock in, clock out, take vacations. Like they're always on recess. And it's like people's lives are being destroyed every minute by this. And you guys act so cavalier and casual.
Yeah.
It's a crisis.
It is.
It's an epidemic. We're losing people. And we're, in Oakland, I'm here in Oakland, they call them $1 million blocks. We spend $1 million per square city block. And in Oakland, those are not big blocks. These are not Manhattan blocks. These are maybe a dozen homes that we're spending $1 million to incarcerate people from just that block. Imagine what we could do economically if we put $1 million into each block in Oakland, with schools, with after school programs, with art and music programs, with nanny services, with educational services, with vocational services, because we've removed all of the Black and brown men from our communities. And we wonder what's going to happen. Why the kids are out stealing cars and causing a ruckus is because of the drug war. It's because of this, disproportionate impact on folks of color based on these sentencing laws and the policing of their communities. And so it's like, I don't understand the casual nature of it. It drives me cuckoo. I'm like, you guys are getting paid to help us, and you act like you're on vacation all the time. Like they work like 80 days out of the year or something crazy.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, this is the conversation that's been going on for how long now? And one of the biggest things that can happen, because it just seems like in many ways, as industry representatives, we don't get taken as seriously because they're like, oh, you've got skin in the game, so your voice doesn't count. But like after legalization, when I was still in the retail environment, I had consumers coming up and saying, the dispensaries are greedy, the brands are greedy, I can't find what I want, I can't afford my medicine anymore. And I was like, okay, so this is the call to action. This is Stoner Civics 101. First off, when we pass something, the cake's not baked yet. You gotta wait because we don't put anything in place until it passes. So sit tight. Secondly, if you don't like the way things are going, you have a voice. And everybody fucked up. Yeah. It's just so screwed up because they have an outdated view of who the average cannabis user is, and they certainly don't think it's a voter that's going to vote them into office.
Right. They don't, and we're not loud enough. And it's so funny you say this. I actually complain about this a lot. I'm always like, where are the people showing up? Like back in the day, patients used to show up and advocate, and they've been so silent. They don't add their voice to we had the the descheduling comments, and it was very hard to get people to make public comment. And I always said the same thing is like back in the day, when we were at city council meetings till 1 a.m, because they would always push cannabis back to the last thing on the schedule every Tuesday night in Oakland. And they would gave us so much antagonism. And I was just like, why are they talking to us like this? And I realized, I went, oh, because we are the only industry where the business people are also the patients and the users and the advocates of it. So of course they're going to think that it's a conflict of interest that we're advocating for this. They don't realize that we're doing it because we actually need the medicine ourselves, and these are our friends and our family. It's not just because we want to keep our doors open.
Right.
I didn't realize that. I was like, oh, of course they think we're just another small business that's just thinking the same. There is no difference between business owners and advocates. The ones that got the licenses to open up these businesses were the ones getting the petitions because they were the smokers and the stoners, the Debbie Goldsberries and all, the Andres and Steves and all the ones that got those really early Salwa, the early Oakland licenses. They were all in it for the plant. In the very beginning, they weren't doing it to make a bunch of money. None of them started out as capitalists. Right. They were just like, oh, this is the way to do it. We have to open up a storefront and create a collective. Cool, we'll do that. and it's just sad because then you also see a bunch of nice people trying to run organizations that need kind of like very cutthroat approaches to business. And they're just always thinking about the patients and giving away free stuff. And that's why none of them really survived. That's why all those people I just named don't have businesses in California anymore, is because we thought that we could have both. We thought we could commercialize and still keep it with the heart. And the DCC and the BCC showed us that that was not what they were interested in doing. They were interested in commercializing it and cutting out all the mom and pops and consolidating it to a very small few that are completely bottoming out the pricing in this market. And it's making it impossible for craft to survive. Every day, another person posts like, we're shutting our doors, or another email bounces. I mean, it's really sad to see that we couldn't, even with so much data and feedback, we told them before it happened what was going to happen. We told them while it was happening what was going to happen. And after it happened, we've told them the impacts, and they're still doing nothing about it. So it is up to us. We need to be lobbying. And I just started lobbying this year, my first time walking into senators' offices and walking into my, in Sacramento and DC. They work for us. Those offices that are furnished with our money. Their staffers that are there are paid to take our comments. And you ideally should have an appointment, but you can walk in off the street as long as you don't have a gun on you. You can walk in off the street without an appointment and sit in their office and talk to a staffer about what your concern is. And no one knows that. I didn't even know that. And I'm an activist. I've been a professional organizer for 30 of my 40 years. I've been organizing and talking and educating and writing to senators. Even as a kid, I've been doing, I was doing boycotts and anti-war protests. Like, I thought I was a professional activist until I started lobbying and going, oh my God, to your point earlier, they don't know about what we need. They're making completely in abstract because no one tells them. So when I go over to them and I say, please pass Prop XXX, they take a quick note and they're like, cool, this is pro whatever. But then when I say it's because my friend just got shot because he's a dispensary security guard and they held him by gunpoint, put him in his car, and made him ram his own car into his dispensary so they could break in, and then shot him during that. Then they're scribbling those notes because our senators and our lawmakers cannot advocate for us if they don't have anecdotal, real-time data from Luna Stower, who's in Oakland, who has a friend at this dispensary on this date who got shot. That helps them because they even if they want to personally advocate for us, if they don't have a list of examples like that of friends of yours who have had to travel to faraway states to be able to get their kids' cancer treatments or epilepsy treatment, those are the stories that they need to hear. In North Carolina and North Dakota, where it's completely illegal, I sit in on some of these, even though I'm not a constituent, and I'm seeing the staffers are writing pages and pages of notes. They don't take a note when you tell them what policies you want. They take a note when you tell them about how your kid with epilepsy has been affected. And I don't think that people know that they have no ability to produce any bills on our behalf unless they have fodder like that to bring to that argument. They're not going to just say, yes, we want weed. Well, why? I don't know, because I think my constituents want it. They're going to say, I have 30 people who came into my office this month that are all saying that their lives have been severely impacted by this drug war. So don't underestimate the power of your story. It's actually very cathartic to feel heard. A lot of us complain, to each other and within our own circles, like, oh my God, this is so annoying. Or, oh my God, can you believe that this dispensary went under? Or, man, my friend just got fired because, or had to quit because she needed to get a loan on her house and they wouldn't give it to her because she works for a dispensary. Or there's a million examples of this, but no one ever tells their senators and their lawmakers and their U.S. Representatives, I can't get a job. I can't treat my kid. I don't feel safe going to my dispensary. I can't afford my medicine. If we don't tell them exact examples, nothing's going to happen. Right. They can't invent it on our behalf, and they legally can't back it up without our stories.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's just an outdated view of advocates and cannabis users. I mean, a lot of us, sometimes it's just like in the beginning, I just felt like they looked at us like we were just a bunch of counterculture weirdos. And hey, I in many ways am counterculture, but when I would go into those meetings, I'd be suited up in my heels. And if somebody was like, I don't even think that she uses cannabis, I'd be like, okay, I win. That means that I've gotten in and someone's going to listen to me. Which is unfortunate. Yep,
you're a root in a suit. That's what I always say. It's the roots and the suits, and ideally you are a root in the suit, because that is the way to get into the halls of power, unfortunately. We need to look like them and sound like them and use their words, which is fine because we want institutional power. We need mainstream acceptance. So whatever we got to do, if we got to put on those heels, let's do it.
Yeah.
That's what I've been doing. I mean, I'm an activist that is an executive at a publicly traded, cannabis company. And it's really a lot of pressure on us to like maintain that legal sterility while also still caring about something that's technically illegal. It's a very fine line that we walk, and it's really uncomfortable. And I would love it if we could deschedule so that I can integrate my business and my personal seamlessly, because we're in America. This is supposed to be the land of the free, home of the brave, where it's about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I think we forget about the pursuit of happiness. Like, what is happiness? Happiness is being able to grow as many plants as I want in my backyard. Happiness is being able to access the medicine that I want without having to be stressed out. It's a constitutional issue, and we
It
need to
is.
treat it as such.
It is. I mean, and part of getting that happiness is making sure that these companies that, don't have the best of intentions, that are influencing policy, aren't treated as people, because they're not. People run them. They are not people.
Are you looking for a lasting, meaningful way to connect with your audience and highlight your brand? Well, listen up, because Planted with Sara Payan is taking on new sponsors. Here's a powerful stat. 20% of listeners are more likely to support brands they hear about on a trusted podcast. And 60% actually look up that product after hearing about it. That's the power of podcasting. Planted with Sara Payan has a unique draw. With remarkable guests, we attract and engage audience that spans all sides of the cannabis spectrum. Picture your message reaching these listeners time and again. Podcast ads are evergreen, meaning your brand stays relevant as new audiences discover and binge past episodes. It's a long-term investment that keeps on giving. If you're looking for a targeted, passionate audience with lasting impact, the right listeners are here waiting to meet your brand. Visit plantedwithsara.com to get a copy of our sponsorship deck today.
We humanize it.
Yeah.
But that's part of why we do these podcasts and why we do this education, is we want to remind people, like, you're not alone. You're not crazy. Stop gaslighting yourself. There's nothing wrong with what you're doing. This is way too long for something so simple and healthy to be criminalized. You're not crazy for thinking, what is going on? Like, am I losing my mind? Like, no, this is the system that's broken. This is reefer madness. This is prohibition, and all the infighting with hemp and all these things. It's all a product of prohibition. So everyone who's arguing within the cannabis industry, within hemp, it's not us versus them. It's us versus the greater them. Like, we have a way bigger fight to fight. And we're splitting hairs over things where, it's kind of like the crabs in a barrel, right? It's like they gave us a few crumbs and they're watching us fight over it, when really it's like we're really on the same team. This plant in all of its forms is still cannabis. And we've been told by the government that 0.3 above and below makes it marijuana or hemp. And we already know that this plant is super complex. But one simple thing about it is it's cannabis. Cannabis is cannabis is cannabis. It's just the conditions and the genetics may vary a little bit, just like hops and wine and all these things. Like, there's huge differences, but then really all beer is beer. But then there's huge differences between the beer, but it's still beer.
Right.
And I think we need to give ourselves a little grace and say, like, we're not crazy. This is just a plant that makes us feel better. It's not killing anyone. And also, do you know a fun fact of why it's not deadly? The actual reason why we don't die from cannabis?
Because of the brain
There is
stem?
no exactly. There's no cannabinoid receptors in our central nervous system, in our spinal column, so it can't override the mainframe, which is so cool. All you'll do is like pass out or throw up or like whatever. But I think that needs to be talked about more too. It's like, nature made this perfect for us. Nature made it so it wouldn't hurt us. Even Marinol. Remember when they came out with Marinol, the pharmaceutical replacement for cannabis, and it was causing deaths? It was literally deadly. Like, it was like 20% of the people who took it had fatal diseases or something from it, or like cardiac arrest and like psychosis, and people were killing themselves and stuff. And we're like, bro, you made a bad copy of something that was already naturally perfectly safe. Like, we have examples of the conspiracy. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's an actual conspiracy against this plant. We have proof.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I'm like, I do not like synthesized cannabinoids. And I feel like, hemp and cannabis should be working together, because like you said, it's the same plant. I mean, we have hard enough time working together just in the cannabis realm itself. And it's like, let's not do this, because in our numbers working together, we have extreme strength. And there's a lot of conversation about the legal market versus the illicit or traditional market, but the fact of the matter is it's gatekeeping from ease of entry getting into the market. Like when I was a co-chair of the legalization task force, when when 64 was still, are we going to do it? Are we not? One of the things I mentioned was, hey, how about when we get into the area of legalization, that era, how about instead of busting people, we have a brochure that shows them how to enter the market and have a streamlined, easy way for people to be able to do it. It would
The
have been
bodegas in New York. I've been saying the same thing. I'm like, you're shutting down hundreds of, like, they're already bringing in money. Just get them online.
Yeah, just get them online. But,
They know the good money. It makes no sense. We killed $1 trillion industry in its tracks as it was blowing up. How un-American is that?
Right. And where did that money go? Back into communities.
Exactly. They're spending it right next door at the other bodega and the coffee shop and their local spots.
Yeah.
I do remember, I actually think the first time I met you was at the San Francisco Cannabis Task Force when I went there with Nina one time.
Oh, that's probably.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah, the Spark guys were there and Terrence and yeah.
Yeah, it was a different time. I mean, it was interesting because like you had people from city family, you had people from the community in it, and so it was really interesting to see how many people came in with their biases about cannabis and then how many people ended up participating in a positive way afterwards. And it was like, having these conversations created normalization, and the showing that there was opportunity in a way that would not harm the community. And all of a sudden there were people that were interested in opening dispensaries or getting involved in policy or starting to consult for companies. And it's like, some people could say, oh, well, they saw an opportunity and they jumped at it, but they thought it was safe, and they weren't deterred by the stigma any longer to participate. And that was huge. And when we're looking at like what's going on now with the illicit market, the state gets so frustrated with the fact that they're not getting the taxes that they were supposed to. But if they lowered the taxes, they would be making so much more money. If they lowered the cost of entry, they would have so much more money and they wouldn't be spending it. I mean, they weren't supposed to be spending it on enforcement, right? And the one thing that pisses me off is that they give money to organizations that actively work against the industry. I understand that you want to make sure things are safe and you want to have, good research and good policy being drafted. But some of these things just don't make sense. It's not being unbiased and giving everyone a fair shake to do the research. It's actually giving it to people whose intentions are to make money off of tanking an industry.
Unfortunately, that's true.
I just, you and I could talk about this forever. I mean, I feel like, voters out there, and I know you all hear me say this again and again and again, it is time to come out of the cannabis closet. We did it. I remember having, and when you and I did it, it was a really grave decision because it's like, will we ever be employable again outside of this?
Yeah. I'm still credential.
Yeah.
I still have an active teacher credential. I still have students that hit me up and say, oh, I saw you on Vice talking about edibles. And I'm like, oh my God. And I'm like, why am I so nervous about that? If I opened up a brewery, I wouldn't be worried. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
Why am I so scared of my former students knowing that I'm in the cannabis industry?
Right.
It's like, it's so much internalized self-hatred. Like we really do have this. We're even in legal states, we're still sitting on stoops in parking lots smoking weed. No matter where I go, I'm in a silk suit speaking at $1 million conference where everyone's throwing so much money around, and we're still sitting in the parking lot smoking. Mm-hmm. Still in legal states, hiding in cars. Yeah, it's past time, and I'm really excited that you have so many people that are listening and can get so much. Like, hopefully people that are coming in new don't have to know all the pains of what's happened in the past, but to just know that it is incremental change. And since when has the state of California or the United States ever cared about public safety? If we had public safety as a concern, the issues that we have in this state and in this country we would not be facing. So we already know that the people that are making these decisions are not using, the proper folks. And I do, shout out to Nina Parks, who was brought into the city of San Francisco to help as a consultant, and to other people that are being, rolled up as consultants for the government. I think that takes a lot of work to speak to what has been perceived as like the enemy, being, on the other side of the aisle. And I think that takes a lot of chutzpah and a lot of spine to be able to sit with people that frustrate you and, are anti-cannabis and, are trying to kind of mess with our industry, and sit there with them and say, you know what, I understand you guys are ignorant. I'm going to help walk you through this and sit with you and break bread with you and humanize you and be patient and loving and compassionate with you and work through how this looks. Because I think that so much of this frustration disincentivizes us. And, it's kind of like why they say, like the white fragility or white guilt, it doesn't help the anti-racist movement, because then you're just so focused on like, oh, I'm so scared and I don't want to hurt anyone and I don't want to be perceived as this. It's like, move past the guilt, move into, I realize, maybe it's not my fault. Maybe these things, maybe the cannabis industry and racism and all these horrible things going on in the world isn't my direct fault, but it's my responsibility. Right. What are tangible things I can do that give me little wins? Because we already know the losses. We've talked about all the downsides of it, but like, what are the wins? It's like, we are now more conscious about women and folks of color in the industry. Equity is now a household term in the cannabis industry. Investors and CEOs, everyone knows about DEI and access and safe access. Like, these things have been integrated into the narrative. And I think that, it's our bravery and our commitment and our intrinsic fire in us to keep this going that has allowed us to be so, keep that. It's a long haul, Sarah, I mean, it's been, decades for a lot of us in this work. And instead of it disincentivizing us and making us want to run, it's kind of like, well, it's like, I've already waited this long. It's like you're at the bus stop and you're like, I could catch a taxi, but I waited for this bus for a half hour. I'm just going to keep waiting. Like, the bus is going to come. I'm going to cut my losses and just like be here for it. And you're with great people. Like, to your point earlier about all these people who were kind of anti-cannabis that end up wanting to get in the cannabis industry, it's because we're cool to be around. They like to hang out with us. We're fun. We're unique. We're pleasure seekers. We love music. We love food. We support each other through emotional well-being issues and physical well-being issues, through relationship issues. We have everything from like tantric and sex coaching to how to make bath bombs to suppositories for elders. You can, get so much love and support just from showing up at a sesh, a pop-up, a PAD, a 420 event. It doesn't even matter what it is. If it's cannabis, people are going to be there. You can show up in a bad mood, with a headache, with a problem with your mom, with cancer going on with your dog, and you could just blurt it out to someone and no one's like, oh my God, we're here to like have a good time. What's wrong with you? They're like, instantly they're sending you links. They're like, oh, my girl will send you a sample for your dog. Go to this dispensary, talk to this bud tender. She has a hook on this awesome product. And let me give you a massage. I'll give you a hug. Like, here's a big hug. Let's go out and smoke a joint and like, chill. And then we can come back into this party. Like, I've never been to a cannabis event where I haven't been able to just be like, I'm struggling, or like, I don't feel good. And immediately people have solutions. They see you, they feel you, because they understand. They've gone through it. And we used to be like that, where we all came together because we had to have a medical condition in order to even have access to this plant. So even if you were just like kind of BSing and just saying, oh, I have trouble sleeping, like, whatever, and then your doctor gives you a prescription, you still subconsciously know that like you gained access to this because of a complaint around something that was not going right in your life, something that was out of balance in your life. So, just like a reminder to keep that knowledge that we have something that they can never have. Like, I go to Benzinga, I go to MJ BizCon, I go to MJ Unpacked, to Hall of Flowers, the highest quality, highest level, most sophisticated and polished events that you can imagine. And a lot of those people that are there, like, you would think are there just for the money. Like, they say that, the Chads and the suits and all these things like that. Like, a lot of them really are excited to be in a new industry that they feel good about. They don't want to be at Philip Morris anymore. They don't want to be investing in petroleum and Boeing anymore. They want to be a part of something. So even though they seem a little like kind of outsiders that are just kind of trying to get in, and of course there are people that are purely in it for greed. But there is this beauty to like people that are like, wow, I've never like had a group of people that I wanted to have, have dinner with after an event or after a conference, that I actually wanted to go out back and like smoke a joint or have a quick drink at the lobby bar. It's like they're finally being able to, be their full human selves at their job in ways that like a lot of corporate structures don't allow for the humanity to be integrated into the day to day. And so I think that there's a magic, and we're converting people and lawmakers when we have Meadowlands, and we're having lawmakers, you know, even at THC Expo, we had lawmakers there, you know, they're seeing the vibes. People are openly smoking. They're seeing the joy. No one's passing out. No one's getting in fights. It's like we have people that work in the halls of government in suits at these events, watching us just do our normal thing. And they're excited to be there. They come back every year. They are genuinely in support. Like you said, they might not be like consumers themselves, but they understand that it's not a big deal. And they see the joy that it brings the community, and they want to be on the right side of history.
That's it. And it's, you know, I love the fact, I mean, you know, when I teach, I always talk about the fact that even though we create our own endogenous cannabinoids, not all of us tolerate phytocannabinoids, but the biggest message around that is, and that's okay. So when I see people that may not partake but understand the importance of it, it really warms my heart, because that, you know, when people will be like, oh, they don't use it, it's bullshit. It's like, no, don't discount that. Look at the passion. Look at where they're coming from. And just going back to like the gatherings, I'm not much for small talk. And you know this about me. Like, somebody would be like, oh, the weather. And then I go deep and they're like, oh, how was it?
You're like, so about my cancer that I survived.
So, you know,
you're like, well, if you want to hang out with me, like certain things just aren't going to be light. Like, like we can have small talk with other people. That's just not what we do in cannabis. We're deep, we're philosophical, we're intellectual, and we're movement oriented. And so like, we're not here for the superficial. We need to get things done because our lives have been saved by it. And we don't want to have fun and party while people are rotting away in prison for something that we're making money on. It's just not right.
No, it's not right at all. And I feel like, you know, between that and, I mean, having the balanced conversations, because a lot of our colleagues, and this is no knock on them because these are lovely people, want to always talk about all the positives that are going on with cannabis. Like, or sometimes, you know, about wishful thinking. You know, it's like, I'm like, okay, so let's talk about what it can and can't do. And let's talk about the fact that it's not a cure, it's a therapy. Let's talk about the fact that, you know, cannabis hyperemesis is real, and you can have a bad relationship with anything. But let's talk about that. Let's talk about the fact that, you know, we should be looking at, as Rick Steves calls, what does he call it? He calls it, oh crap, I can't remember. It's harm reduction, but he uses a term before then, and Rick's gonna be like, you know what it is. But it's like just really being like matter of fact about it, like pragmatic harm reduction, talking about pragmatic harm reduction, and being like, not emotional. Yeah, not everything's for everybody. And if somebody's having a hard time with a relationship with a substance, there should be no shame about it. Let's talk about it. Let's create a safe container for people to have these conversations. Because, you know, otherwise, if we don't talk about the issues that other people will use to weaponize against cannabis, you know, if we're not at the table, we're on the menu. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about creating safer standards for testing. Let's talk about modes of use. Let's talk about, when we're looking at modes of use, like the levels of risk. Like for me, I love joints. And Jeff is like, honey, I don't have any problem with how much cannabis you use, but that paper, like if you're smoking that all the time, maybe not such a great idea. And you know what?
Yeah, it's carbon. Yeah. We're inhaling ash.
Yeah. He's not wrong. So
yeah, and for you to not be triggered by that and be like, and I love that there's a nuance to that, right? That you're not demonizing the substance, you're demonizing the carbon. Let's talk about combustion, and that is the conversation. And same thing with my dad. He actually doesn't have a problem with my cannabis consumption at all. He just gets upset anytime I post anything on my story where I'm smoking. He's just like so upset because he lost his mom to lung cancer, you know? And we're in the nicotine space too. So we understand. We're working with Clear and ID.me to do point of use age gating. So instead of it being point of sale, which we already know that, you know, nicotine and other vapes, even cannabis, for all the vapes, because, you know, we just do the empty vape hardware, as you can see in the background. People can fill whatever they want into them, but we're addressing the fact that we realize that point of sale is not enough. It's still getting into the hands of kids. So there's a technology that we're working on that actually verifies age at the point of use on the device itself, and how important that is to really, as we're getting into the EU GMP certification, and as people are coming online and all these bans are happening in the nicotine and the cannabis space, in vape specifically, to try to nuance that conversation and be like, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's about heavy metals. It's about, carrier oils like vitamin E acetate, these things that caused the vape gate. It really harmed vape as in its safest form. And so, like you're saying, to get ahead of the naysayers, the not in my backyards, the save the children people, if we can get ahead of it by saying, hey, we've already vetted for risk. We already know what the issues are. We've learned from Juul and all these people who got sued for targeting or not being responsible for the accessing of their products by minors, people who are not of age. That helps, take away some of that pain and that fear that has been caused by either bad actors or folks that were just genuinely ignorant, or mistakes that were made. It's really important for us to say, and this is why also we started Vape Safer. It's a coalition that was founded by AVD that's now called Active. It's a 501c6 that has Blink, True Terpenes, Pax, Puffco, Ispire, Abstracts, Tex, who else? And Terpene Belt Farms and a few other really important actors in the space, that we get together, we decide our bylaws and our standards for vape as manufacturers, because if we wait for the regulators to do it, it's not going to be relevant to what's real, and it's going to be fear mongering. If we do it for ourselves and we say we want to set this standard for ourselves, that looks a lot better to lawmakers and legislators to see that there's a broad coalition of terpene companies, hardware manufacturers, people that are in this space, to really make sure like we're not waiting to be regulated. We're not waiting to get in trouble. We know what's safe and what's not safe. We've gone through the recalls. We're aware of what could shut our businesses down, and we've watched the news. We see the dramas that have happened from this. We're not going to be waiting around twiddling our thumbs. We're going to get ahead of it and actually be the ones that set the bar and have the nomenclature, and really, really get to kind of show that we are the masters of our own destiny, that we can be the captains of our own ship. And that's something that I'm really excited about at Ispire, is we are vetting for that. We do have a team of lawyers that are, have CYA policy and are making sure that everything's super safe, because we not only need to survive as a business, but it's the right thing to do. It's the ethical thing to do. And that's also why they have someone like me on staff. It's just focused on, impact and DEI and giving back. And it's companies are learning now that when you have a give back component, it's better for revenue. It's better for brand saturation. Customers are more loyal. There's less turnover internally. You're more likely to attract investment. I have a whole deck like called Love is Lucrative, where there's all these statistics that are like, why does this crunchy feel good give back actually have a triple bottom line? Like when people are in it, you can actually have profit. Like love can be lucrative, like revenue and reputation don't have to be mutually exclusive. You can have both. And so I think that that's kind of the next stage for us, is instead of, just focusing on all the ways that we're like perfect and everything's great. It's like, no, these are the potential harms. This is when we could really go sideways and take a hard left turn. Let's get ahead of it and say, we are going to be the ones that are policing ourselves. We don't need to be policed by folks that have no concept of what they're even addressing.
Yeah. And that's, in many ways, that's stewardship. It's showing up. And I know we've gotten into all these things because I love talking to you about all this, but we didn't even really talk about Ispire as much. And it's, honestly, like Luna, I didn't know who the hell Ispire was until you got into it. You've done an amazing job highlighting the company and making it, at least in the industry, a household name, being aware. And I think that's especially challenging when you're looking at ancillary companies, because who sees that as much as like it's, if you're embedded in the industry, you may be aware, but as a consumer,
oh yeah, and we're like capital B to capital B. Like we're not even normal B2B. Like we're like a truly just like a hardware provider, So we came out early on with some consumer devices. So it kind of confused the market a little bit because we had a dab rig and stuff like that. But once we went public, the SEC does not like paraphernalia. So we had to scrape that and go back to what we invented. But yeah, our founder invented the vertical coil vape pen that the entire vape space is built on. So anytime you've ever seen a vape, anything that has an atomizer or a coil, that patent was made by Tony Liu in 2009. We have like 2,500 something global patents that Ispire registered here in the US when we went public, and separated from our founding, our parent company, Aspire. Now they're just one of our many partners that we manufacture with. But yeah, it's been a wild ride because, people saw our patent come through other distributors that were bringing it to the United States, but it wasn't under Ispire's name. They were basically copies that came to cannabis, but it never really worked that well because the viscosity was always made for e-cigarette, not liquid. So when Ispire kind of was watching like what was happening in the United States with what was really their technology and it wasn't really fitting, they were like, let's try our hand at cannabis. So it's been about 4.5 years that they started, and I've been with them, just under that. And it's been really cool to see how much we've really been able to build from, being a Chinese vape manufacturer to becoming a United States-based company with all US-based, designers and engineers and sales team. And people don't have to be on WeChat with China 15 hours ahead. Like our whole team, speaks Mandarin and they deal with all of that. So it's been really nice to kind of, because when I was at Jetty, the hardware provider that we were using lost me some of my biggest accounts because they had poor, they didn't work. They either popped, leaked, clogged, the batteries would run out. And it really hurt me a lot when I was a vape sales rep to be like, wow, the hardware manufacturer actually is kind of like the crux of it. It's not just an afterthought. You have to have a really, really good supply chain all the way through. And people just don't think about the hardware. They're like, oh yeah. And then you just buy those on Alibaba or cheap carts. And it's like, terpenes are volatile solvents and they literally break down whatever they're on. And if that chimney has any heavy metals in it, after just a few months of sitting at room temperature, or sometimes a few weeks, like you're going to get all those heavy metals. And vape is not something that you use once in a while. You're using it multiple times a day, every day, days on end without stop, which for exposure to those kinds of things is probably one of the more dangerous ways to consume cannabis. So because of that, that's why we're even more concerned about making sure that everything's safe and that, we're GMP and ISO, everything from top to bottom is double, quadruple checked before it's filled, it's checked after it's filled, it's checked, tested months after it's been filled, sitting there to make sure that there's nothing going on. Like we're doing business in California, and anyone in California knows that the vape gate crisis and has put a big, big, big magnifying glass on our industry, which as a consumer, I think absolutely is a good thing. I'm happy about that. I don't think that, we should just be getting away with, cutting corners just for the sake of business. We are able to make good business and have safe products. And I've been so proud to work with this company because they don't cut corners and they don't just put things out just because it's ready and they want to make back their money. They are really concerned about their reputation and about causing no harm in the space. And for a vape manufacturer to have that level of ethics and morality is really hard to find.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's something that I think is hard to find in business in general. And when you do, it's like it's something to uplift. And I just, you and I have been doing this a long time. And I really feel like as much as things have changed and some of the heart has changed, I think there's still a lot of us out there that believe in what we're doing and want to look at new ways of seeing business and being in community and really looking at, how the tech world changed the way we do business and show up at work. We can do the same thing with the models of compassionate capitalism that we saw back in the 215 days that some people have still maintained, and we can push that forward in the world. You can do business and create joy and create community awareness and cohesion without losing any money. It actually will be quite prosperous for you if you can do that, because third verse, same as the first, isn't working for us. Don't bring your bad corporate habits into cannabis. Learn something from the people who have created wonderful things that are feeding their communities.
Amen. Well said.
And as we close up, what are some things that you're excited and hopeful about for the future?
Yeah, that age gating technology is super exciting. That's something that I'm really excited about. Also, just our filling machine has been killing it. We basically solved the number one problem in the cartridge space and the disposable space for cannabis vapes, and all vapes, which is the capping process. So we have an all-in-one filling machine that it doesn't have any cap. So it has a special syringe that goes in and seals itself on its way out. And it really helps for, avoid contamination. And a lot of the issues that you see with failures in cartridges usually relates to the capping process. Either they, didn't cap it in time, or they filled it too hot, or something happens with the pressure, or it's upside down. It's supposed to be right side up. So 95% of issues that we've seen have been with capping. So we kind of removed that whole issue. And so we've been working with a couple of large MSOs that have it in play. And it's been really exciting to see their productivity, because since no one can write off 280E due to their taxes, for the folks who don't know, in 1981, there was a precedent-setting case of a drug trafficker that was able to successfully write off on his taxes his operating and his payroll costs related to a drug trafficking case. So the IRS pulled in the 280E clause, which makes it so that any Schedule I substance cannot have any tax write-offs on it. So when you have things like labor and operating costs, that's 80% of 70 to 80% of a business usually is relating to payroll and labor as their operating costs. So when you have something like this filling machine that not only helps reduce human error and contamination, all that stuff, but also is just like so much more productive and so much more, they can, fill, tens of thousands more per day than they normally could, really helps business. Cause that's something that 1080E would normally not be able to write off. But now that it's just a machine, that's a write-off versus the human labor for it. So that's really exciting. I'm going to Colombia next month for MetaWeed World Congress and Dabadoo. It's Mila the Hash Queen's 80th birthday. We're celebrating her. And MJ BizCon, I'm speaking on 3 different panels, a couple on December 3rd and one on December 5th, about mentoring women in cannabis, influencer marketing strategies, and worldwide brand international export and import and market opportunities outside of the United States. So if you guys are at MJ BizCon in December, come check us out. We have a booth. Ispire will be there. Not sure the booth number, but you'll probably be able to find us. We're usually really loud and proud. And we'll be doing some after parties and hanging out. And then celebrating the Chinese New Year. So we're really busy because everything shuts down for Chinese New Year. So all of our sales reps and everyone's busy getting in their last orders, last customization, so that they'll ship after Chinese New Year. And so we're kind of heading into the last big bang of the year. And I'm super excited to be back in California after 2.5 weeks in Chile, and going to go to Missouri in a couple of days for MJ Unpacked.
I'll see you
to
there.
Speak on a panel there. Yeah. So it's fall cannabis event season.
I love
it's crazy.
it.
Chaos,
I love
but
it.
super fun.
And
My first time in Missouri.
Well, no, actually I have been in Missouri. I was just in Kansas City, so I always think about it as Kansas.
Right. The mind melt.
Exactly. So if people want to follow you on social media and see what you're doing, how do they do that?
So Ispire is at Get Ispire, Ispire. It's like Inspire without the N. And I'm Luna_Stower, STOWER. You have to type it all the way out because Meta shadow bans me, even though I'm just educational content.
I feel that.
And lunastower.com.
Thank you so much. I always enjoy our conversations, and I'm looking forward to more. And I'll see you at BizCon, and I'll see you at Unpacked.
Absolutely. And I've been loving watching you on LinkedIn. You're a linked influencer. It's really, really nice to see us in the professional community sharing what we do with the world and mainstreaming it. So thank you everyone for tuning in. Love you, Sarah.
Love you too.
And everyone, remember, if you like listening, please give us a review, share it with a friend. Let us know what your favorite episodes are. And if you'd like to stay in touch over social media, we are Planted with Sara Pion on Facebook and Planted with Sara on Instagram and Twitter. You can also go to our website, www.plantedwithsara.com, or listen to us on our parent network, Radio Misfits Network, where there are other great podcasts, like one of my favorites, the Winemakers Podcast. So check it out. You can listen to Planted wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, whether that's Pandora, Spotify, Amazon, Google, Apple, Stitcher. Tune in. We are there. So join us. And until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and remember, it's a wild world out there. Be good to one another. Until next time, take care.